and their dedication for their nation and therefore their future. Thank you for having the day that we shared the truth with the senators and representatives and the staff, where they invited us, listened us, heard our pain, and shared the thoughts with us. Thank you, Almighty God, and we ask you that you protect the Armenian people who are forced out from Artsakh. Guide them in this hard time in their lives and lead them into the safe haven. Return to their homeland and have the future in their century-old homeland. Once again, we thank you, Lord, for all the opportunities that you give us, but also we ask that you bless the Armenian people in Artsakh, in Armenia, in diaspora, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Lord.
We are truly blessed today to be joined by the founding chair of the Congressional Armenian Caucus, who has been with us from the very beginning. There are people in this room who were not born when Congressman Pallone were hard at work in the trenches, fighting, building bipartisan support, building consensus, passing legislation. He's been with us each and every step of the way, through the good times, and especially when it matters most, through the toughest of times. So there's a lot I could say about Congressman Pallone. He's a great friend from New Jersey. Great state. But instead of me going on and on, I'll give the floor to Congressman Pallone, one of our all-time great champions globally of the Armenian people. Thank you.
Thank you, Aram, and I appreciate that, except about people not being born or something. I don't know if I like that part. Thank you. But I just wanted to kind of convey what we're doing in the Armenian Caucus along the lines of what you all care about, I believe. Obviously, those of us who have been in Artsakh, who are trying to protect and defend Artsakh for years, are very upset over what's happened. There's no other way to explain it. I read today that they were dismantling the parliament in Stepanakert. I don't know how far that goes, but I assume they'll just probably destroy it. And I worry about the churches, but mostly I worry about the people that fled and their ability to come back. And you know, without prejudging what that exactly means, there's no question that we in the caucus, and I personally believe that the people of Artsakh have to be able to go back to Artsakh. We're not just talking about them, you know, becoming part of Armenia, the Armenian Republic. They need to go back. How that manifests itself, how we get to that point, you know, we can certainly talk and, you know, try to find a pathway, but it has to be done. And I'm not just talking about reparations. I'm talking about actually being able to go back and have a life, a secure life in Artsakh. When we meet with the State Department and we meet with you know, our leaders here in the United States, we stress that. We also stress the humanitarian assistance that should be available for people who fled and are in Armenia. What the future is for this package, you know, there's a supplemental appropriation package that includes funding for military aid to Ukraine, but also is supposed to have humanitarian assistance a significantly larger amount than what's already been given by the State Department. And we're still trying to accomplish that too. There's a discharge petition on the floor. We'll see what happens. But we have a commitment from the State Department and USAID that a significant portion of that money, if that bill is passed, would go to the refugees from Artsakh. But I think the bottom line is, look, the lesson I learned through all of this, and I hope that the State Department and our government understands, is that we cannot believe anything that Aliyev says, right? In other words, if people say we're going to negotiate a territorial agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, do I believe it? No, okay? If we're told, Aliyev is not going to attack Armenia or southern Armenia or try to take it over the way he did Artsakh, do I believe that? No. I believe that he will fully intend to use his military, whenever possible, to take over the southern part of Armenia, or the whole of Armenia, for that matter. I don't put anything beyond him. And so the main focus right now is, can we get a few things. First, can we get some major military assistance to Armenia so it can defend itself, right? And I know they're buying things from India and they're buying things from other countries, but we're talking about the United States actually providing military assistance. This is what was requested when we went with Nancy Pelosi to Yerevan, before the attack on Artsakh. And that means major defensive equipment, as well as whatever's necessary. And I'm not talking about training or giving people some rifles here, okay? Then the other thing is some kind of sanctions against Aliyev, so he knows we mean business. Because, and I won't talk too much longer, but you have to understand that in the months that led up to the invasion by Aliyev of Artsakh, we were trying to get the State Department to open up the corridor with Lemkin, right? And within 2 days of the attack on Artsakh, the State Department thought that they had an agreement with Aliyev to open Lemkin, to open a corridor through Baku, and to allow humanitarian assistance in so that the people wouldn't starve, right? And they were under the false impression that they had that agreement, and instead he attacked and invaded Artsakh and threw everybody out. So he doesn't think that we're serious. He does not think that the United States is going to defend Armenia. He doesn't think that the United States is going to do anything. And that's got to change, and that can only change through some sort of sanctions, through assistance openly to Armenia of military supplies and equipment, through some, not just statement, but action on our part that's meaningful. And that's where we are. That's what we're trying to achieve. So I think I'll leave it at that. But I just want you to understand, I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for all the members of the caucus, both Democrat and Republican. I mean, I haven't asked them if I can say this, but I think just from knowing them that this is what we all would like to see. And you need, obviously work with us, with the ANC, to try to accomplish this. And that's what we're going to try to do. All right, thanks.
I want to thank Congressman Blown once again. Thank James, who's been at his right hand for many years, helping us nonstop on every aspect of this issue. So I am going to turn to Geb Iskajan in just a short while to offer remarks, but I'll review, thank you, Congressman, review some of what we've done today. Most of you today spent the day on Capitol Hill talking about exactly the things I'm going to talk to you about now. And then I'll turn over to Geb. And then our two main speakers of the evening are Karnig Kerkonian, noted international lawyer who is very active on many fronts that are vital to our nation, and Elisa von Joeden-Forgey, who I think is still meeting with members of Congress even as we gather here today. So what we're trying to do, as you all know, is to hold Azerbaijan accountable to deter renewed Azerbaijani aggression, to force Azerbaijan to pay a price for what it has done, and to prevent it from doing what it clearly intends to do, which is to attack Sunik, to go from Sunik to Geharkunik, from Geharkunik to the rest of Armenia. That is their stated intention. They've made no secret of it. They've acted upon it in a systematic fashion. We are today down Artsakh, 120,000 forced out over the course of just a few days at the end of a 10-month blockade. So deterring them, right? Very often we hear from the State Department, what can we do? And we answer that question by saying, well, you can stop arming them. How's that? You can stop giving them the guns with which they're killing Armenians. You can stop emboldening them in ways that, actually I'm going to pause right now, and because we're joined by Congressman Judy Chu, who is a leading member of the Armenian caucus, along with Congressman we'd like to offer remarks. I will get out of the way, but simply say this, that very few people, especially in the last few years, made the dangerous trek to Artsakh, to Nagorno-Karabakh, and I'm saddened to say that you will be, for the time being, one of the very last, but not forever the last, members of Congress will return to a free Artsakh. But thank you, Congressman Chu. Let me invite you to the podium.
Well, I just had to come and say hello to all of you for this very special event, and I wanted to emphasize to you how much in solidarity I am with you and with making sure that the refugees from Artsakh are taken care of. Yes, I did make that trek. I went to Artsakh and took that helicopter ride over there, and I thought Artsakh was so beautiful. So it just really saddens me to think that they are no longer there and that they are in Armenia, though I know Armenia is taking good care of them. But what I'll never forget also is that before I went to Artsakh, the ambassador of Azerbaijan came to my office and said, if you go on this trip, then bad things will happen to you. So when I came back, I was banned from Azerbaijan. Yeah. It's a badge of honor. We will do what we can to make sure that there's justice for the people of Artsakh and that one day they can return. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Congressman Chu. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you for going to Artsakh, and we look forward to the day when you can return to a free Artsakh. Thank you very much. I could not be happier. Really, because we're joined today by the lead author, the author of SRES 540. Each of you spent today moving between Senate office to Senate office. Each of you today made the case for the very legislation that Senator Markey has introduced. It is, as you know, a privileged motion, a motion that if we can build the support to get it to the floor, we believe we can get it passed on the floor. We're blessed that Senator Markey from the great state of Massachusetts is leading this effort. We are proud to knock on doors, to talk to our senators, to make the case for this legislation. I'd like to invite Senator Markey to offer his remarks today. Thank you so much, Senator Markey, for being such a great champ.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Good. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here at this commemorative event and to have the opportunity to bear witness to the opportunity to join with you to talk about the horrific attack against Nagorno-Karabakh and the resulting humanitarian crisis. As we all know, Azerbaijan launched a large-scale attack against Nagorno-Karabakh on September 19, 2023, causing a mass exodus of more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians from the region for fear of further persecution and ethnic cleansing. Unsurprisingly, the Azerbaijani government's hollow promises of a ceasefire and safe return to the area have failed to materialize. Instead, Azerbaijan has unlawfully detained prisoners of war, refused to pull back its forces from Armenia's territory, threatened new attacks, and made escalating demands upon Armenia. To Azerbaijan, I say no to changing Armenia's constitution. I say no to surrendering sovereign Armenian lands. I say no to remaining silent on Armenian genocide. No to the ethnic cleansing of the historic Armenian land of Nagorno-Karabakh. And that is why I was proud to introduce the bipartisan Senate Resolution 540 last month, which would require the Biden administration to provide a report on Azerbaijan's human rights practices, including extremely concerning reports of human rights violations, such as unlawful killings, torture, restrictions of freedom, of movement and erasure of Armenian cultural heritage and ethnic cleansing. I've also called on the United States for decades to formally recognize the atrocities committed against the Armenians in World War I as genocide. On April 24th, 2021, after years of my advocacy and letters to multiple administrations, President Biden rightfully prioritized human rights and justice by recognizing the genocide that resulted in the death of 1.5 million Armenians. The Azerbaijani government and its reprehensible actions go back years, and it is long overdue to hold Azerbaijan accountable for its conduct towards Armenia. It is also well past time to make clear to the Azerbaijani government that it must cease all hostilities and return to peace. I will continue to work to bolster the will, the rights, the freedoms of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, including their right to return to their homeland, and to ensure that Armenia has the support it needs to protect itself now and to protect itself in the future. I look forward to continuing to work with the Armenian American community to address the issues facing this longtime friend and important ally of the United States. And together, we can build something positive, something hopeful, something good for the future. An Armenia that is respected and honored by its allies and neighbors. And it will take the United States to be the partner with them in order to create the political leverage, the political power to carve out that space so that Armenians are able to live in peace and dignity. Thank you all so much.
No sooner did Congressman Gabe Amo of Rhode Island enter the U.S. Congress than he started leading on Armenian American issues. A new piece of legislation that was passed in the Senate unanimously, S3000, to take back to, how do I say this? To give back to Congress the right that they initially granted presidents many years ago to send military to Azerbaijan. The Congress is saying now, the Senate with one voice, a unanimous vote, hopefully the House soon with a unanimous vote, that the president, that is not a right that the president has anymore. That U.S. military to Azerbaijan should no longer be allowed. Azerbaijan abused that right, abused that assistance. So the legislation that's been introduced, I think it's a HR 7288, each of you I think on the House side today were lobbying for that legislation, is co-authored by the congressman. I think it was among the first pieces of legislation that you led on. So I'd like to offer you just an opportunity to please speak with us and for us to say thank you to you for all your help, Congressman.
I'm so grateful to be here, largely because it's maybe my 125th day in the Congress. And in so many ways that encapsulates the importance of the Armenian community to me. When I think about home, I think about Rhode Island, a place that took my family, my parents, two West African immigrants from two different countries, Ghana and Liberia, and welcomed them. And at every point of the way in our story in Rhode Island, we have had Armenian community support. And so for me, it was no fluke that when I got onto the Foreign Affairs Committee that this is something that I would pursue. Even before I took office at the various church festivals that I went to, I heard, stand up, Gabe. And today, I am so happy to be with you in fellowship. You know, the fact of the matter is that this is bipartisan legislation in a time where you can see it's a little hard to get things done in a bipartisan fashion. And that's because the clarity that we have in sending a message to the government of Azerbaijan and our partners around the globe that the United States will not stand for unprovoked attacks on the Armenian people. We cannot allow the government of Azerbaijan to get a free pass for their brutal military aggression and blockades against the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. So you have my partnership. This is the first legislation that I've been a lead sponsor on, but you should hear this. You should hear this. I hope that we marry this effort with what has happened in the Senate, that we have the unanimity of the mission, and that if this is my first, it will not be my last. If the work requires it, and really, I am so heartened by the resilience, by the hard work, by the determination of the Armenian community, and I am so honored to be in partnership with you. So thank you for letting me support you.
And by the way, Rhode Island is well represented in this room.
Rhode Island.
Yeah, as is Chicago. We have a good representation from Chicago. We have Mara, we have Ken, others as well. And the great Armenian community of Illinois, of Chicago, is blessed to have a great member of Congress in Brad Schneider, who has joined us today. He has supported us across the board from day one. We want to thank him.
Good afternoon. It is a privilege to be here with you, and more importantly, I am grateful that you are here with us. Good to see you. And we had a meeting today, early this morning. You caught me in the morning. You caught me in a reflexive moment, which was how are things going, and my response was, I'm really depressed around here. This place is not working the way it was intended. You've got me now at the end of the day, and I can tell you things still aren't working as they should be around here, but there are still some good things. And seeing so many people here to come to Congress, and so many young people in other meetings I've had today. But we've got some real challenges. And first, let me say, I can't believe it's only been 125 days, Gabe. We sit next to each other on foreign affairs. We were grateful to have you get here. We were waiting for you. And since you've been here, you have done an outstanding job. And I did not realize it was your first bill, but I knew it was a very important bill, and I'm grateful for that. And in this world, getting support in the Senate unanimous on anything is all but impossible. Getting support in the House may be even harder, but this is legislation that we need to move and bring forward. And we talked about a number of issues earlier. We saw a horrible situation in Artsakh last year, and it is not over. The displacement of 120,000 people cannot go without comment, cannot be left to stand. And it's important that we don't let it. I shared earlier the idea that you never want to be the fifth item on a 4-item list. Congress is dealing with a lot of pretty important and heavy things. The news is, you go back to your hotels tonight, you're going to read about discharge petitions on standing up to totalitarianism from Russia and Ukraine, and terrorism in the Middle East, and threats in the Indo-Pacific. The world is stronger when the United States leads, and the United States is strongest when we lead with a clear voice, a clear moral statement, a clear moral position. And we need to lean in. You heard Senator Markey speak with clarity. You heard Gabe speak with clarity. Evidently, Rhode Island is a very significant space because the entire delegation is now here. But we do stand shoulder to shoulder with Armenia, the Armenian community, and the American Armenian community. I'm proud of the Armenian community in Chicago. It is strong. It is, I'm tired, so outspoken is not the word I mean. It is clear in its voice. It has a voice that is heard, and I'm grateful for all of your partnership and friendship. I'm grateful to be here with you. And in Congress, we have a strong Armenian caucus, led by Frank Pallone and Gus Bilirakis. It's not an accident that we all come here to serve, because we know why we are here, we know what we are fighting for, and we stand with you. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for the meetings you had. I know for Illinois, you had 14 meetings over 2 days. I don't know if you had 2 meetings in Delaware. You got them both here. You don't need to meet. But the fact, and Jim Costa, who sits 1 seat down from Gabe. So we've got Gabe sandwiched here. We stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, but also with Armenia and Armenian community. So thank you very much, and good luck.
As Congressman Schneider mentioned, we are blessed to be joined by Congressman Costa of the Central Valley of California, a longtime friend who, in ways seen and unseen, time and time again, has stood up for our community. Just no more ardent, devoted champion on every issue, whether it's the genocide issue, whether it's Artsakh, whether it's the empowerment of our community here in the United States. He's just been a dear friend and a powerful ally. Thank you, Congressman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. You better not. Good evening.
Good evening.
Wake you up. My name is Aram, and I come from the land of William Soroyman. And that obviously, for those of you who know, one of America's great writers, Pulitzer Prize winner, and wrote about the journey of Armenia and Armenians. Says it all when you grow up as I did, with the Abrahamians and the Khazarians and the Collegians, and learned when I was 10 years old, sadly, of the Armenian genocide from my dad's very good friend, Daron Collegian. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. But yet we see the world in a challenging time again. As Brad indicated, I think members of Congress, those of us who believe that America is still the beacon of light of democracy around the world, know that our leadership must be strong and it must be consistent, whether we're talking about Armenia, whether we're talking about Ukraine, whether we're talking about challenges with Israel and Gaza. The world has changed, and we have to be absolutely able to maintain America's leadership, and it's being challenged. Not only around the world, but here in the Congress, it's being challenged. Ethnic cleansing is happening right now, and it's a part of Artsakh and Armenian, as we refer to it. And while the world attention was focused in Ukraine and now in Israel, and Azerbaijan felt it's had a free hand to do what it wants in Artsakh. And we saw the displacement of 120,000 Armenians from their historical home of over 1,000 years. And that's why the humanitarian assistance in this supplemental package, in which we are trying in many different ways to bring to the House floor to pass. Failure to provide that supplemental package is going to result in continuing suffering and challenges for Armenia. And that isolation will only further create issues that we must be with Armenia. We must send a clear message to the government of Azerbaijan and our allies around the globe that the United States stands with the people of Armenia. Azerbaijan must be held accountable. They have not been held accountable. And we need to start with halting any future military aid, right?
Right.
And we must look at other means to deal with Azerbaijan. President of Azerbaijan, like the President of Putin of Russia, I believe are war criminals. War criminals. The violation of human rights is well documented. And therefore, we need to do everything we can While they have attacked Armenia, they've weaponized and starvation of those that were in exile before the removal. And so your efforts and your support with our Armenian caucus is absolutely essential. The Congressional Armenian Caucus has consistently called upon the United States to use every diplomatic tool, including sanctions, to guarantee the right so that they can live in their native homeland. But now we must act. Besides trying to bring the version of the bill that passed the Senate that has humanitarian assistance that would include support for Armenia, the 120,000 refugees, it would also provide a much meaningful support for Ukraine and for Israel and for the Palestinians, where humanitarian assistance is certainly needed, and with our allies in the Far East. There's another piece of legislation that I am working with called Defending Our Borders, Defending Our Democracies Act, to strengthen security here at home and abroad. We are working to put language in that measure next week that will provide humanitarian assistance for the 120,000 refugees in Armenia. Whether we secure the Senate, the package of the Senate bill that was acted on, or this other package, we must use every possible means. Because as my colleagues know, if you get these measures to the House floor, I believe there's over 300 votes. That is absolutely wrong that the Speaker and a small minority of folks are withholding us from voting on much needed support that will once again show America's leadership in the world. Let me close by saying that I remember last year His Holiness Aram I in December 2023, his visit reminded us of these horrific events, and he talked about the need for Armenian supporters to remain resilient and strong, and that's what we must do. Let's stay together, and let's stay focused, and let's do the right thing, provide the support for the Armenian community who we represent and reflect and love. God bless you.
So we have today the full Rhode Island House delegation. I can attest that on the Senate side, we're very fortunate to have Senator Whitehouse and Senator Reid, who've also been great friends. Congressman Magaziner has, since taking office, just really filled the shoes of past legislators from the great state of Rhode Island and gone beyond that in many ways. He's been a great champion. Very, very proud to be joined here by Rhode Islanders, but also for all of us. We all look forward to hearing your remarks today, Congressman.
It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you, particularly my colleague from Rhode Island, Gabe Amo, who you will be hearing from, and all of the Rhode Islanders who are in the room. Normally, it is a time of joy and celebration for us to come together, those of us who are at a very dark time, And I do fear that if the United States and our allies do not step up swiftly to do more to help the Armenian people defend themselves, we will regret it. There is the potential for another catastrophe, for potentially another genocide, if we don't act. And this is one of those times when platitudes are not enough, and hand-wringing and thoughts and prayers are not enough. It requires action. That is why, since I got here, I have signed on to every bill and every letter that I can to urge action. We have to get Armenia the support that it needs to defend itself. Because, make no mistake about it, Artsakh was just the first step in, unfortunately, a devious, larger plan that Aliyev and the Azerbaijanis have. And in the same way that we now regret the fact that we did not do more when Putin invaded Crimea all those years ago, we will regret it again if we do not take a strong stand now in helping the Armenians to defend themselves. So we need to stand strong and say, not only no more military assistance and aid to Azerbaijan, but we have to get Armenia the resources that they need to defend themselves as well. I was in a meeting just last week where a number of Armenia's champions in Congress, including Speaker Pelosi and Ranking Member Pallone and others, were pushing the State Department to do more and to do it faster and to feel the urgency of the situation, because it is truly urgent. And I'm very proud of the fact that our Rhode Island delegation is 100% unified. We stand strong not only with our own Armenian community in Rhode Island, which we value, but Armenians around the world who have been through so much and who only strive for peace and freedom and the humanity that we are all entitled to. I know that Representative Amo's first bill, which I'm sure he will talk about, is on this topic, and I think that's fitting as well. And just another sign of how, you know, Rhode Island has your back. So thank you all very much for being here.
I want to take a moment to thank our coalition partners who are here today as Americans of Armenian heritage, but I also have many, many friends who are here. The Hellenic American Leadership Council has been by our side since day one. In Defense of Christians, Middle East Forum, and many other groups. I would list at the very top of that list the Lemkin Institute. And we're joined today by the executive director, the founding executive director of the Lemkin Institute, Elisa von Joeden-Forgey. Which I've, okay, you got that right?
Yes,
okay.
perfect.
Okay. So Elisa is the executive director, as I said, of the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention. She was formerly the endowed chair in Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Keene State College, and the director of a master's program in Genocide Prevention and Human Security. Before this, she was the Dr. Marsha Radikoff-Grossman Associate Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Stockton University in New Jersey, where she also directed the master's program in Holocaust and Genocide Studies and founded the world's first academic graduate level genocide prevention certificate program. She is the former president of Genocide Watch, another great ally, former first vice president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars, and co-founder of the Lemkin Institute, as I said. She received her MA and PhD in history from the University of Pennsylvania and her BA from Columbia University. I say all that to say thank you for being such a really very, very powerful ally. You raised the alarms, the Lemkin Institute raised alarms before anybody, and I'm sad to say the warnings that you issued were entirely accurate. You saw what was coming, and sadly, what you predicted did come to pass. All the more reason we should heed your words, and we should make sure that the message of the Lemkin Institute is understood, appreciated, that it takes its place in places like this, in Capitol Hill, at the State Department, and in the White House. So, Elisa, please, we'd love to invite you to offer your remarks today.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and the ANCA for inviting me to speak to everybody here today. I've spent a really inspirational day with many of you visiting congressional leaders' offices and senators' offices and watching this great democracy in action. And it is my deepest hope that this country will rise up to the occasion, as the congressmen and senators have said before me, to prevent genocide, an ongoing genocide in the South Caucasus. I'm going to be frank as I start this talk. I speak to you today, as others have mentioned, at a time when the Armenians in the world are undergoing another genocide, what many call the Second Armenian Genocide. And as a genocide scholar, I think that is apt. This is a slower genocide than in World War I, so it's easier for people perhaps to turn away from it. We could say that we are witnessing a genocide by 1,000 cuts, but these 1,000 cuts could end up being just as destructive to the Armenian identity as the maelstrom that kicked off in 1915. In the past 3.5 years, the Armenians, right, have not only lost their 4,000-year-old Armenian territory of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, to Azerbaijan, but have also witnessed the gradual encroachment of Azerbaijan on the territory of the sovereign Republic of Armenia. This cannot be ignored. Just recently, the Armenian government confirmed that Azerbaijan is occupying 31 villages within the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia, which comprise 170 square kilometers of land and threaten roads, among other things, roads linking Armenia to Georgia in the north and to Iran in the south. So this is a direct assault on Armenian sovereignty, and yet the world is quiet. This assault on Armenian sovereignty is a coordinated assault by Azerbaijan, Turkey, and their close allies, aimed at slowly strangling Armenians' independence, with the goal of either creating a weak and ineffective rump state that does what they demand, right? Or ridding the region of Armenians altogether, so that Armenia, the idea, is dispersed throughout the world with the people and made up only of refugees. The assault on Armenian sovereignty is not only occurring in the South Caucasus. In East Jerusalem, for example, Armenians are also at risk of losing their historical lands. And in the diaspora, the activities of the Turkish nationalist Grey Wolves terrorist organization are on the rise, placing Armenians at risk even in regions where they are strong, in Glendale, California, for example, or in Paris, France. So we may be seeing, in fact, the gradual extinction of a strong Armenian cultural presence in our world right now. To this point, I want to recall for us what Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan said in a speech in July 2020, a couple of months before the start of Azerbaijan's 44-day war against Armenia and Artsakh. During that war, Azerbaijan committed genocidal atrocities, of which I'm sure everyone here is aware, against any Armenian that fell into its hands, including beheadings, ritual humiliations aimed at the Armenian identity, and mutilations, much of which was filmed, disseminated on social media, and celebrated within the Azerbaijani and Turkish public spheres. Before that genocidal war, so in July 2020, which Turkey wholeheartedly supported, Erdogan said, "We will continue to fulfill this mission which our grandfathers have carried out for centuries in the Caucasus again." The mission he referred to is the genocide of the Armenians in the name of the expansionist ideology of pan-Turkism. The implications of this genocidal process extend far beyond the South Caucasus. The implications, I would suggest, and the Lemkin Institute believes, involve the future of humanity and of the human species. So I want to speak a little bit on that. Armenia is one of the oldest ancient civilizations, continuous civilizations in the world, a civilization whose contribution to humankind cannot be overestimated and should not be underestimated. It is being threatened alongside other ancient civilizations in our world, particularly in the Middle East, particularly the Christian and Yazidi populations in Iraq and Syria, with a similar genocidal pattern involving dehumanization, terrorization, murder, atrocity, and ending with forced displacement. As anyone who has traveled to this region will know, we need the wisdom of these ancient communities in the coming decades as we face as a species the greatest threats to our own survival in human history. And I'm speaking here about climate change. So So we have to be clear. The greatest threat faced today by the Armenians in the Republic of Armenia and beyond is that they are up against a state, the Republic of Azerbaijan, whose president is actively claiming Armenian territory as historically Azerbaijani, who has suggested that Armenians are not indigenous to the territory, but are recent immigrants, and who harbors a clearly genocidal form of Armenophobia, which he has made sure is deeply imbricated in all of Azerbaijan's institutions, including its schools, think tanks, the military, and the press. Azerbaijan's global freedom score is now 7 out of 100 points. It has dropped 2 points since 2023. That puts it below Myanmar and Saudi Arabia, and just 1 point above Sudan and Afghanistan, making it patently an unfree state. No part of Azerbaijani society is independent of Aliyev and his genocidal ideology. Azerbaijan is a genocidal state, and it will remain so unless clear actions, are taken by the international community. Azerbaijan's aggressive Armenophobia led to the lightning speed genocide, as we know, against the Armenians of Artsakh on September 19th, 2023, when the enclave was depopulated of its 120,000 Armenian inhabitants in a matter of a few days, thus ending a 4,000-year-old continuous civilization on that territory. At the Lemkin Institute, we refer to this as one of the most successful genocides in history, 100% almost. But Azerbaijan's extreme Armenophobia continues to be ignored and overlooked, which means that the true nature, the genocidal nature of the threat faced by Armenians, right, is also not recognized. So we can talk about peace deals, we could talk about both sides, right? We can equalize these two states somehow, although it's only one of them that is threatening the other with genocide. Western nations should not make the mistake now. This is really an important moment. Should not make the mistake now that they made before September 19th. When they ignored Azerbaijan's many crimes, really often didn't speak of them at all, or recognized them, but saw them as one-offs, failing to appreciate that this series of war crimes were actually part, when you bring them together, they were part of a genocidal process. So we don't want to arrive again as Western nations on the day after with weak apologies and meager contributions to humanitarian assistance. We need to do better, and I think we can do better. It is not that there were not warnings. I just want to remind everybody of this. It's not that there were not warnings before September 19th. And the warnings were not only coming from Armenian sources. At the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, we actually referred to the Artsakh crisis as a perfect storm for prevention. The Republic of Artsakh was a clearly defined territory, even historically, with a population that was over 99% Armenian, a tradition of Armenian self-governance, and a strong desire for independence. The enclave was surrounded by a state whose president routinely engaged in genocidal rhetoric against Armenians, calling them rats, jackals, and dogs, among other dehumanizing slurs. This president also openly threatened to invade Artsakh, to commit genocide in Artsakh, and made it clear that he was staking his political future on a total victory over the Armenians there. Additionally, the major powers had investments in and close relationships with Azerbaijan's regime, so they had considerable leverage to influence Azerbaijani policy. It's really hard to imagine a real-world scenario better positioned for a successful genocide prevention strategy than this one. Even if Western leaders, let's say, were not paying attention to the speeches of the Azerbaijani president, which are actually available in English on the State of Azerbaijan's website for everybody to read if they like, genocide scholars and genocide prevention experts were routinely issuing warnings and alerts on the genocidal nature of Aliyev's words and policies. This was especially the case during the 9-month blockade of Artsakh that predated the September 19th genocide, when almost no humanitarian supplies or daily necessities were allowed into the enclave, causing suffering and death. On August 7th, for example, the former chief prosecutor of the ICC, Luis Moreno Ocampo, released a report that found the blockade to constitute the crime of genocide in and of itself. On September 5th, the Lemkin Institute issued a 127-page report on the threats of genocide against the Republic of Artsakh and the Republic of Armenia, using the United Nations' own framework of analysis for the prevention of atrocity crimes, in which we outlined the genocidal nature of the blockade and predicted an invasion and genocide in the coming weeks. Now, at the Lemkin Institute, we can only guess the reasons for the world's silence before and on September 19th. But we want to make sure now that a similar scenario does not happen again. To prevent the recapitulation of the Artsakh genocide in Armenia and to slow the genocidal process that is now underway, the US government, the European Union, and other interested states must get serious about devising and implementing a coordinated and clear genocide prevention strategy in the South Caucasus. They know what that is. They've been trained in that by several genocide prevention institutes that I have worked with. I know their curricula, so I know folks know what to do. The current peace process that is ongoing is not working. Right? I don't think it's even controversial to say that anymore. It fails to accurately reflect the enormous threat that Azerbaijan poses to Armenia, and arguably has provided cover for Azerbaijan's continued aggression against Armenia. We could have a second genocide, or a third genocide, I suppose, if we call Artsakh the second. We could have 2 genocides occur under cover of a peace process. How does that make any sense? A genocide mechanism for the South Caucasus is particularly important now, given the recent uptick in threats being made by the Azerbaijani president against Armenian territory. Therefore, we must do several things quickly, and I'm concluding. First, we must take history very, very seriously, so we have to contextualize this. This includes short-term and long-term history. Long-term, of course, the threats faced by Armenians in the South Caucasus are a continuation of the genocidal ideology of pan-Turkism that drove the Armenian genocide from 1915 to 1923. That ideology is still strong in Turkey because the country has never had to come to terms with or account for the genocide that it gave birth to. We know from scholarship that countries that have never had to account for their history of mass atrocity are 3 times more likely to continue committing mass atrocity in the present and future. So Turkey needs to account for its past. As we know, Turkey is very close. It's a very close ally of Azerbaijan. President Erdogan often refers to the 2 countries as 2 states, 1 nation. And it is threatening not only to support Azerbaijan in an upcoming war against Armenia, but is also itself actively expanding into Syria and Iraq at the expense of Christian, Yazidi, and other minority communities there, as well as Kurds. Azerbaijan, for its sake, was born as a nation state after World War I, in part through its participation in the Eastern Campaign of the Armenian genocide. It has historically committed a host of genocidal acts against Armenia. It tries to flip the script, but the genocidal acts have come from the Azerbaijani side and have been committed against Armenia since the 1920s at the very least. So pogroms in the 1920s, pogroms again at the end of the Soviet Union in the 1980s and the 1990s, atrocities committed during the 2016 war, during the devastating 2020 war, during the 2022 war, during the blockade of 2022 to 2023, and during the September 19th invasion and forced displacement of the ancient civilization of Artsakh. There is absolutely no reason to believe that Azerbaijan will act any differently in the future, given its absolute impunity thus far. Second, we must apply a robust genocide prevention framework to geopolitical analysis. Geopolitical analysis does not exist in separation from genocide prevention. To date, Aliyev's crimes have not been properly understood as part of a genocidal process, but rather have been interpreted as singular events, as war crimes without an overarching logic. Genocide prevention frameworks help us see what's really going on. They help us see patterns that are indicative of existing or emerging genocidal processes. They connect all the dots. Since genocides tend to expand from an initial target population to new territories and new targets, and end up requiring massive military engagement at some point to stop, genocide actually constitutes one of the greatest threats to national security and human welfare worldwide, and it always has through history. So, no state and no people truly benefit from allowing genocidal processes to continue with impunity, and I think that goes for the United States and its citizens as well. Third, world leaders need to listen to the experts. There was a virtual consensus among scholars and prevention practitioners before September 19th that Artsakh was facing genocide at the hands of Azerbaijan, just as there is now a virtual consensus that the Republic of Armenia is facing a similar threat. There's almost never a consensus like this, and this consensus now exists among people who have devoted their lives to researching and identifying genocide because the threat is so clear. Fourth, Western nations must apply real pressure against Azerbaijan, and I think that's why we're here today, by withdrawing military, economic, and diplomatic support and threatening it with legal action. Such actions will require heavy lifting and strong leadership. It's not easy, since they will constitute a significant challenge to the workings of power in the region and to existing diplomatic ties. But they will pay off in the long run by containing, this is really important for American foreign policy, by containing the destructive and destabilizing ideology of genocidal pan-Turkism, which is relying on the territorial unification of Turkey with Azerbaijan for its expansion further into Asia. Fifth, the United States and members of the European Union must make it clear to Azerbaijan's allies, especially Turkey, but also Israel, both close Western partners that supply it with most of its arms, that complicity in future aggression will not be tolerated. And sixth, and this is only a post-September 19th edition, Western nations should begin the process of recognizing the self-determination claims of the Armenians of Artsakh. The Artsakh genocide, do we have to go? Is that like a, no, it's not a fire alarm? Okay. All right, the Artsakh genocide, I'm gonna stop soon, guys. The Artsakh genocide has one silver lining, and one can rarely say that, and I almost hate to put it this way, but in a way it really is a silver lining. And that is that many of the people of Artsakh are still alive. Like the Yazidis of Sinjar or the Christians of Nineveh, the Artsakh Armenians are refugees now, 100%, just as those populations were. And they face the loss of their distinct 4,000-year-old Artsakh culture, which is distinct from other Armenian cultures. And they face that loss in the coming years, so we have to act quickly. It is a culture that relies on the lands and the mountains of Artsakh for its existence and for its meaning. The Artsakhs have to go home in order to continue to exist. Azerbaijan is, of course, busy destroying all traces of Armenians' existence in Artsakh. But the Artsakh Armenians can rebuild if they can go back. So by starting a process to address the competing legal claims in the region and to find a sustainable solution that recognizes the long history of Armenian autonomy in Artsakh. Artsakh has never been directly under the control of Azerbaijan, even in the Soviet Union. And as we know, in the post-Soviet period, Artsakh declared independence and fought a war to win de facto independence in that region. Azerbaijan has never ruled directly over the Armenians of Artsakh. So by starting a process to take seriously their self-determination claims, Western nations would signal to all the dictators and would-be genocidaires in the world that the rules-based order is alive and well, and that aggressive genocide through displacement will neither be normalized nor tolerated by the United States of America. We almost are never given this opportunity to undo parts of a genocide in this way. When does that opportunity come around? We have that opportunity now, and we should really embrace it. I want to close by noting that we are in a time of enormous historical change. So all of this is playing out in a very uncertain time. The post-1945 world order is being challenged by a new contest between great powers for access to land and resources, and this is part of that. Unlike previous scrambles for territory, such as the one that kicked off the new imperialism of the late 19th century and eventually led to the First World War, the world population today seems to be eyeing these developments with greater comprehension and a sharper critique than we have seen before in history. One could even say people across the world are responding with a kind of unity that is there when you're looking for it. This shared consciousness has to do with many factors: the internet, social media, of course, but also the development of English as a global lingua franca, the integration of the world through migration, and the increase in global travel for ordinary people. We are aware of one another in an unprecedented fashion. And in my brighter moments, especially as I engage with Gen Z, I feel that the people of the world are embracing the value of human equality to such an extent that this era will eventually constitute a positive watershed moment in the history of humanity. And we are living in it right now. As part of this surprising development at a time of great global crisis, I also see human beings rejecting genocidal solutions to long-term political and territorial disputes and calling for stronger measures against states and groups committing genocide or threatening to commit genocide. The age of impunity for genocide might be coming to an end. Azerbaijan's policies might be a relic of a bygone era. But we still need to take steps to bring those policies to their final resting place. Genocide is a crime not just against a single identity group, but against humanity itself. It seeks to erase specific manifestations of our shared life on this planet. Therefore, what's going on in Artsakh involves all of us, Armenian and then Odars like myself as well. When we lose identity groups, we lose all the wisdom that they have built through their collective efforts here, a loss we could never afford in the past, but that we especially cannot afford now. Losing ancient civilizations is a particularly grave strike against our species, as those civilizations have a lot to teach us about how to live together and in a balanced way on this beautiful earth of ours. Armenia is one of the most ancient, continuous civilizations in the world, with an apostolic faith that is very close to the Christians, the first Christians in Mesopotamia. It deserves to be protected. It must be protected. So let's protect it. Thank you.
Elisa's words truly spoke to the title of this program, which is Reversing Genocide. It's rare that we can do that. There was an opportunity to prevent, but there is also still an opportunity to reverse. We have remarks now by Karnig Kerkonian, who I think will perfectly complement the points that you raised. Karnig is, among many things, a founding member of the recently launched Committee on the Protection of the Fundamental Rights of the Artsakh People. If you are not familiar with that committee, you will soon be familiar with that committee. It's a vitally important committee comprised of some of the best legal and political minds in the Armenian world. They have great work to do, and they will be successful to the extent that we all put our shoulder to the wheel and work to support the work of this committee. Karnig is a seasoned lawyer. He currently leads the International and Federal Practice Group at Kerkonian Najani. We love both sides of Kerkonian Najani. Liz is obviously a former intern and a dear friend. He focuses on complex litigation, foreign sovereign immunities, commercial sanctions regimes, and commercial transactions, both international and domestic. He holds a AB magna cum laude in government from Harvard University and 2 law degrees, a JD from the University of Chicago, where he served on the law review, and a postdoctoral diploma in public and international law from Cambridge University. So you've been slumming, I guess. At Cambridge, he studied under James Crawford, who later became a judge at the International Court of Justice. Your bio goes on and on. It's like it just gets better and better. I'm going to skip to the end here to say that you're a world-class lawyer. You work on a whole range of issues. You're now very active on the Artsakh issue, very much at the center of Artsakh's rights and Artsakh's return. And on top of that, because you're not busy enough, he's leading the effort to save the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem. So with that said, let me invite Karnig Kerkonian.
Thank you, Adam, for the kind introduction, and thank you for the warm invitation to speak here today. Listening to Elise, I have to say, catastrophe. This is a moment in Armenian history that is a catastrophe of epic proportion. Epic proportion. Some of what I'm going to discuss today is going to be difficult to hear. Some of it is going to be difficult to digest. Some of it is going to be difficult even to believe. But I can assure each one of you today that everything we're going to discuss is true. It's painfully true. It's disgustingly true. September 14th, 2023. At a congressional hearing right here on Capitol Hill, Assistant Secretary of State Yuri Kim testified, and I'm quoting, "The United States will not countenance any action or effort to ethnically cleanse or commit other atrocities against the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh." 5 days later, Azerbaijan ethnically cleansed the entire Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh. Secretary Blinken then tweeted from Turkey that he was discussing, and I'm quoting directly here, the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and finalizing Swedish accession to NATO with the Turkish foreign minister. In almost laughable lockstep, the New York Times, who for 286 days refused to publish anything material on Azerbaijan's blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh, was suddenly awakened. Nobody saw it coming, was the headline. Really? Nobody saw it coming? Nobody saw the utter depravity leading up to that moment? Perhaps the New York Times missed the official government stamp Azerbaijan had issued, depicting an exterminator in a hazmat suit actually cleansing Nagorno-Karabakh of Armenians. Or perhaps Ambassador Kim missed that military trophy park in Baku, proudly showcasing gruesome and bloody mannequins of fallen Armenian soldiers, displayed in a public park for Azerbaijani children to mock and degrade. In fact, at the time of Ambassador Kim's testimony, Azerbaijan had already circulated videos of Armenian captives crawling on their hands and knees, being prodded like animals with metal pipes by Azerbaijani soldiers. Armenian children had already been decapitated by Azerbaijani drone fire. Elderly Armenians had already been decapitated by Azerbaijani soldiers using handheld daggers. Armenian women had already been marketed for rape on Azerbaijani social media channels. The orders came from the very top. The president of Azerbaijan, in this century, a century after the genocide, as Elise properly noted, the first Armenian genocide, was referring to Armenians, to many of us, as dogs. Azerbaijani politicians were calling Armenians cancers, tumors, and rats. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody thought that maybe Azerbaijan was preparing to exterminate the Artsakh Armenians like rats, chase them out like dogs, cut them out like cancers. No one? What did they think was going to happen as the Azerbaijani army completely encircled Artsakh, starved actual human beings to death and submission, cut off cities, families and villages, shot farmers, cut gas, electricity, denied them water for 286 days? Children and churches, languages and livelihoods, families and freedoms, all degraded, desecrated, demeaned, destroyed. This is not never again. It's not never again at all. One nation, two genocides, 1 century. It's a national catastrophe of epic proportion. Epic proportion. So how in the world did we get to this moment? This is what I want to talk about today, here in DC, because how we got to this moment has as much to do with decisions made right here in this city as it does with that hereditary dictator thousands of miles away in Baku. You know, it shocked me when policymakers and think tanks in Brussels and Washington started suggesting at the end of the 2020 war that the best outcome for Nagorno-Karabakh would be some sort of integration or protected status within Azerbaijan. That was a narrative developed and sold by policymakers here in Washington and over there in Brussels as a settlement, a dignified settlement to the Nagorno-Karabakh crisis. And the story went like this. Artsakh Armenians would be given certain rights and protections to live peacefully within Azerbaijan. And thus, Azerbaijan's territorial integrity would be respected and Armenians would live safely and with dignity in their homeland. You may remember the language. The international community told Yerevan that if it would just lower the bar on Artsakh and speak about the Artsakh Armenians from the perspective of minority rights, not as a people with the right to self-determination, but as a minority. And then by some geopolitical magic, the seas would part, peace would reign, and the global world order would find a beautiful equilibrium in which all peoples of the region would flourish. This was a false narrative. Washington and Brussels were advocating to place Armenians under the control and authority of Azerbaijan right at the time when Genocide Watch had raised the genocide threat level facing Artsakh Armenians to levels 9 and 10, when the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention had warned that Azerbaijan's actions, and I'm going to quote you here, are part of a larger genocidal pattern demonstrating Azerbaijan's Armenophobia and genocidal intent aimed at the eradication of Armenia, Artsakh, and the Armenians. In that documented reality, the solution being pandered by sophisticated parties right here in DC was to actually place Artsakh Armenians within Azerbaijan. That's a workable solution for the fate of actual human beings. Integration, when 100,000 Armenians remained under total blockade by Azerbaijan for more than 9 months. Integration, when Azerbaijan was seeking to completely isolate, encircle, and starve actual human beings. The administration's dignified solution was to push the Artsakh Armenians into the authority and control of a regime intent on destroying them. That we even allowed this narrative is appalling. You know, there's a reason why Armenians have a visceral aversion, a sharp stop to the thought of being subjected to the authority of the Baku regime. Actually, there are a number of reasons. Shushi, Baku, Sumgait, Kirovabad, Maraga, Nakhichevan, all of them brutal massacres, all of them the ethnic cleansing of Armenians by Azerbaijan. Aliyev is cultivating a society committed to destroying the Armenian nation. And this is not hyperbole. Aliyev has said it himself. We will destroy you, he told the Armenian Prime Minister. And he's not done. Just over a year ago, Aliyev announced the creation of the Goycha Zangezur Republic, a new republic, spanning from Gyumri to Sunik in Armenia itself. And before you laugh it off, think about this. Azerbaijani soldiers carry maps of this new republic in their pockets. And Yerevan itself is on those maps. Unrealistic? Aliyev has people parading in Brussels and Geneva and right here in Washington, D.C., advocating for what he calls Western Azerbaijan. That's the name he uses for Armenia. And he won't stop at a peace treaty. Fascist upstarts just don't stop. We already know this. In addition to his forced occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh, Aliyev's armed forces, as Elise mentioned, now control 31 towns and villages inside Armenia. And his military posts are literally positioned across from Armenian elementary schools. So that you can actually, so close, you can actually hear the masked soldiers talking to one another in their heavily armed and fortified posts. Think about the view outside your kids' school right now. And Aliyev has friends in this campaign to subjugate and destroy the Armenian people. Erdogan stood next to Aliyev at a military parade in Baku after the war and openly praised Nuri Pasha. He's the Turkish leader who actually executed the eastern flank of the Armenian genocide a century ago. The message was clear, at least to the Armenians. Don't worry, said Washington and Brussels. We'll make sure that the Artsakh Armenians have security guarantees, you might remember that word, that phrase, perhaps even a protected status within Azerbaijan. This was a colossal sham. What demented legal framework would allow or even condone pushing a targeted population into the military and political control of a perpetrator seeking to exterminate them. That would be absolutely absurd as a legal principle. It would make no sense. Except, of course, if we pretend there's no genocidal perpetrator. And that takes us back to Ambassador Kim's congressional testimony. Let's pretend there's no genocide. Let's pretend we don't know what Aliyev is planning. Better yet, let's pretend that we would never countenance it. You see, if we never name the perpetrator who's starving an entire people to death under threat of force, if we don't use the word genocide, and if we pretend it's not happening, then we can continue to push Azerbaijan's integration agenda. Hell, not our kids. But there's a rub. Pretending that there is no genocidal intent is, well, it's pretending. And if you're pushing for integration where there is genocidal intent, you're helping Aliyev commit genocide, aren't you? You're literally helping serve up the victim. And there's a word for that in international criminal law that describes this kind of helping. It's called complicity, and it's really illegal. I want to emphasize this. Washington and Brussels were advocating for integration of the Artsakh Armenians into Azerbaijan, while Azerbaijan was already engaged and was actively engaged right then in the ethnic cleansing of the Artsakh Armenians. The blockade itself is evidence of that campaign. And the backstory, well, the backstory is unavoidable too. Azerbaijan had already ethnically cleansed Armenians from every city that has fallen under its authority and control. Now, it even labors to cleanse the land itself of any evidence of Armenians, destroying Armenian churches, unearthing entire Armenian cemeteries, scraping away ancient Armenian inscriptions, and claiming Armenian churches are actually, well, they're Albanian churches. Recent reports even indicate that Azerbaijan was building concentration camps to house these integrated Artsakh Armenians. Just this month, Aliyev demolished the very parliament building from which Artsakh Armenians operated an actual democracy for 27 years. You see, Aliyev's integration agenda was actually Aliyev's genocide agenda. Human mutilation, beheadings, rape, indignities, dehumanization, starvation, isolation, concentration camps, and the destruction of cultural and religious heritage, those aren't the hallmarks of an integration plan. They're the hallmarks of a different type of plan altogether. They're just not say it out loud. So what now? There are 150,000 indigenous Artsakh Armenians displaced from their native 4,000-year-old homeland. Don't forget the 30,000 that were displaced after the war in 2020. It's been 175 days. The situation is dire and it's urgent. Allowing Azerbaijan's occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh to persist, cementing it, simply cements genocide and rewards genocidal intent. Slaughter, and you shall receive. And to be clear, nobody disputes the Artsakh Armenians' right to return to their native homeland, not even Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan says that they should return as Azerbaijani citizens. Think about that for a second. Would you send your children to live under Azerbaijani military and political control? To be slaughtered, to be starved, to be degraded, to be oppressed, to have their Armenian identity literally ripped out of them? Would you do that to your own children? You see, when the intent to commit genocide, when acts of genocide are underway, and they are still underway right now, It is the right of return and self-determination that is required. Given Aliyev's genocidal intent, the Artsakh Armenians are entitled to return to their homeland under international protection, not to be pushed naked into the clutches of the very dictatorship working to destroy them. And don't be fooled by that sideshow. Peace treaties with genocidal regimes do not end genocides. Actually, they empower them, they fuel them, they normalize them, they cement genocides. An entire Armenian civilization has been uprooted and is being destroyed in real time. Every day, Azerbaijan demands more. Just last week, it demanded 4 more villages in Armenia to be turned over, or else. Or else what? More genocide? More displacement? More refugees? More occupation? More desecration? More mutilation? More what, Mr. Aliyev? You know, enough is enough. It has been a century of it for the Armenian people. Generations of it for the Armenian people. We must stop fueling a petty genocidal thug from destroying what is left of the Armenian people. And the way to do this is not by further enabling the perpetrator or by pretending Azerbaijan is not seeking to destroy Artsakh, Armenia, and the Armenian people. Azerbaijan must be forced to withdraw from Nagorno-Karabakh. It must be forced to end its military occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh, and it must be forced to accept an international peacekeeping mission to guarantee that which it cannot ever guarantee: the Artsakh Armenians' right to return to their indigenous homeland in actual physical security and with actual human dignity. Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough for those just incredibly powerful, very inspiring words. There is a path to return. The committee that has been charged with this mission deserves all of our support. You'll hear more about them in the coming days and weeks. We need to rally behind this effort. Between Karnig and Elisa, I am just so very impressed, and I feel privileged to have been here to hear both of your remarks. I look forward to sharing them widely to people beyond this room. I am now looking for you. Kev Iskandar. Kev, I have to embarrass you for a moment at least. Kev is a personal hero of mine and so many others. He left the comfort of his home in California and moved to Artsakh during a very, very difficult time. He endured with the people of Artsakh 10 months of blockade. He was a very powerful voice, and one of the few English-speaking voices that shared the story of Artsakh with the outside world. I can't tell you how many dozens, probably well over 100 congressional meetings just here in the U.S. briefings that he did from on the ground in Artsakh. And then on top of that, he did the same thing for Europe. He did it for communities in the Middle East. He did it for communities in Asia, in Australia. With all the time zones you were covering, Gav, I don't know how you got a moment's sleep during the many months of that terrible blockade. He served as the executive director of ANCA of Artsakh, and I'm very, very proud to say that he is the newest member of our national ANCA team here in Washington. And
so today I have no interest in talking about the brutality of the Azerbaijani regime. I feel like you guys do a way better job in outlining it than I ever could. And anybody that wants to look into it, it's as clear as day to see who they are and what they represent. I want to tell a different story today. I want to tell a story of love, a story of resilience, a story of will, I want to tell the story of the people of Artsakh. In the 2 years that I had the privilege of being there, standing shoulder to shoulder with some of the most incredible people that I've seen, I've been left with a few images and a few stories that I want to share with you guys. I'm left with the image of a mother and 3 kids who I came across during the war, during Azerbaijan's attack in September. And I'm left with looking into her eyes, asking her if she's okay, if there's anything she needs, and her looking back and saying, yeah, just one thing, don't stop fighting. And it is with that spirit, it is that spirit that I see in the eyes of the advocates that we've had this weekend, and in the eyes of the allies and congressmen and senators and their staffers that I've seen. Today, this isn't a commemoration. This isn't a vigil. This is a call to action. When I look at the amalgamation of our advocates and our allies, there's only one word that comes to mind. That word is power. We have no intention in sulking. We're never going to put our head down, because every moment that we waste doing that is a moment that we can't fight and advocate for the people of Artsakh. And to those incredible people of Artsakh, I want them to know that the people in this room, they're going to make sure that your voice is heard in rooms that you can't enter, that our feet will march on streets that you can't see, that justice will be pursued in courts that you've never been into, that even though you are 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 miles away from us, you are in our hearts. And it is this call to action, it's a word that I like, because it entails that there's work being done. It is this work, this call to action, that I'm sure is going to make sure that our sun rises again. It's going to make sure that our spring blooms again, and it's going to make sure that the Armenian nation rises again. It is the people in this room, it is the collective power that you hold. So to our allies and to our advocates, I say gear up, and to all our opponents, I say good luck.
I don't know anybody would like to close our program in. Again, very kind words. Thank you all for joining us today. Very, very important program. Share this program online as widely as you can. Geb's words, Elisa's words, Karnig's words, very, very powerful. We're joined in this room. I mean, you're all brothers and sisters. We've been in the trenches together today and many days before this one. I turned to look at Robert here. I don't know how many fights we've been in together. And we've always had each other's back. The Hajj and the Armenian Church has always been at the forefront. A national church that has always stood for our democratic, our national aspirations. We're joined by so many friends. I think each of you here, those of you who don't know each other yet, please take a moment at the end of the program to get to know each other. It's these connections, I think, that make us so very strong. So I want to thank everybody. Earlier today, we thanked the Congressional Armenian Staff Association. I'm going to offer another thanks to the Congressional Armenian Staff Association. Those are the Armenians who work here in Washington, in the nation's capital, 4 members of Congress, 4 committees, sometimes for district offices, very often for offices here in DC, and they have been a great resource. They are the Armenian community here, whether that's St. Mary's or Supach, all the entire community, everyone who gathers around the local ANC, whether, I don't know if Matt is still here. Matt is the new chairman of the ANC of the District of Columbia. We got Sussy here from ANC of Virginia, ANC of Maryland. We're all available to help in every way, and I'll wrap it up with that, with a sincere thanks. Thank you all.